Here with Anna Mancuso, Republican political strategist and one of our familiar faces. Always appreciate you being here. Brian Crowley, both stars of High Tops and Politics, their podcast, and of course, CrowleyPoliticalReport.com. Thank you for being here. Talk about how big of a priority early on. We sort of know the answer. Give us the shape to the answer of Florida's pivotal importance in the presidential election. Anna, we'll begin with you. You already had President Trump on the Panhandle days ago talking about recovery, trying to get money for Hurricane Michael victims. Talk about 2020 in Florida.
Florida is obviously a huge player in 2020. You know, we're such a large state with 67 counties that you could break us down into 5 different states. And we know that it's a massive priority for Trump to win again in Florida.
Stop. We had a camera and a mic issue. It was off.
You know, in the old days, you had a bottle
Testing
of
1, testing 2.
Now our familiar faces, our roundtable, Anna Mancuso, Republican political strategist, and Brian Crowley, author of CrowleyPoliticalReport.com, and of course, High Tops and Politics, their great new podcast. Talk about presidential politics, Florida, always pivotally important. The president here last week in the Panhandle talking about hurricane relief. Give us the shape and context of Florida's importance for 2020, Anna.
Florida is one of the largest swing states in the union, and we know that it is, with 67 counties, if you broke us down, it's roughly about the size of 5 states combined. And we know that it's kind of oftentimes referred to as a mini United States because of the migration patterns and the development that we're seeing across the entire state, not just in the Panhandle, but in southern Florida as well.
Any path to the White House for President Trump that does not include winning Florida? He won it, it was close in 2016. You and I sat there that night watching the returns. Does his path have to include Florida?
Oh yes, it absolutely has to include Florida. And you know, Politico reported last week that the Trump campaign is already putting a lot of focus on Florida, already looking at hiring staff in Florida. And they're talking about making Florida almost a separate entity unto itself as opposed to make it in a regional effort. And I think there's probably a little bit of ego involved for Trump, and I don't mean anything unkind about that, but he lives in Mar-a-Lago, you know, he's lived in Florida for part-time for 30 plus years, and I think he sees this as one of his other homes, and I think the idea of losing Florida would be you know, difficult for him to deal with. Of
course, third biggest political prize on election night, so it's pivotal to anyone, but the Democrats, their argument is, might find a math that didn't include it. Trump, President Trump,
well, when you look at the 2018 election, where we had recounts and the new governor and the new U.S. senator win by a fraction of a percentage point, it gives you a hint at what 2020 might look like.
Let's talk on the Democratic side. Right now, he's lapping the field early on, but Joe Biden, all of those years as VP, all of the political chits he's collecting, he's out in front of the field. Long campaign ahead. He's already working on climate change policy he hopes will appeal to environmentalists and blue-collar workers, who he hopes will be a big part of his base. Climate change in Florida. Talk about policies and how they begin to do the soundings that might appeal to places like Florida. I assume that's all part of the stagecraft and political craft that they're thinking about even now, Anna.
As they should. You know, we know that climate change is a really big deal across the country, as well as the entire existence of our universe.
And yet a controversial debate for many Republicans.
But with Governor DeSantis in office right now, we know that he started using the phrase climate change, and I know that a lot of us are very excited to hear him actually paying attention to that and speaking to that. And we see that Joe Biden is running on the campaign trail and talking about climate change. It's really important. You know, if we look half a world away into Syria, they suffered a drought as a result of climate change, and some people believe that a portion of that has actually played into the refugee problems, which has reshaped European politics, and we possibly could see the same thing here in Florida.
Brian, talk to one of the big issues that seems destined to shape minds, an issue of local but also national import. Democratic presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand, senator from New York, said if she becomes president, she'll only nominate judges who would uphold Roe v. Wade. and abortion as a potentially major campaign issue, as a major driver next year. Where, with the debate, do you see that in terms of helping strongly, if you feel that way, shape the contours of the campaign next year?
I think abortion has the potential to be a huge issue in the 2020 election. We've had several states now pass legislation, fetal heartbeat,
Georgia,
which means basically 6 weeks till you can detect a heartbeat. The intention of that legislation is for it to go to the Supreme Court. Many people who oppose abortion believe they finally have a court that at the very least will restrict abortion. I think it's going to be a big issue. I think conservatives see their moment. As far as trying to appoint pro-Roe v. Wade justices, well, you know, there aren't going to be that many openings left. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we don't know how much longer she'll be able to stay on the bench.
Forever.
She's been quite ill, but
She will be
well,
there
forever
forever.
perhaps. But Trump could conceivably get another appointment before his term is up.
Same question, your take, Mariana.
I would have to agree. Georgia just passed one of the most restrictive abortion laws, joining 14 other states in the union with this. And we're seeing that a lot of people are saying the reason states are passing this type of legislation is to ensure that it goes to the court and eventually makes its way to the Supreme Court for them to make the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And so when you have Democrats such as Kristen Gillibrand coming out and saying that she wants to ensure that she's going to appoint justices that will uphold Roe v. Wade, that is going to be a very imperative moment for voters as they head to the polls in 2020.
Interesting as we begin to shape early on the contours. Brian, one last 10-second thought.
Well, I was just going to say that I think with Roe v. Wade, with this new legislation, because Roe v. Wade was a trimester system, I think the chances of the fetal heartbeat being heard and perhaps accepted by a majority of the court is very real.
Thank you both, and back with your final comments in just a moment.